What is a video card? A video card is a piece of computer hardware, also known by many as a graphics card. The two names are interchangeable and have been for a while. The definition of graphic or graphics is relating to visual art, especially involving drawing, engraving, or lettering. This perfectly fits the description of what the video card does. Video, coming from the Latin word video, meaning to see, it is, again, essentially what it sounds like, hence the name of the video card. It is critical to understand that the card part of the name is just a generic term for a device that connects to a PCIe slot on a motherboard. More on that later. They are often rectangular and can be added to a collection of components inside the computer, almost like adding a card to a collection of cards. This is where it gets its name from. The card essentially allows you to see what your computer is doing by putting images onto a display. It must be noted that the speed at which displays refresh the images in hertz, which is limited by your display's hardware and on the hardware of your video card. You need a certain connector to display varying qualities of screen graphics and resolution. I will speak more of this in a future video. Now that we have the basics of what a video card does, we can move on to what it is used for in terms of production and advanced use cases. First and foremost, video cards are often associated with gaming. Now, I put emphasis on gaming as it has really been turned into a style of marketing. However, in basic terms, gaming is playing video games, and when talking about video cards, it is often associated with high detail and resolution quality while playing those games. For example, playing a game at 4K resolution, the highest consumer resolution currently available at the highest settings with a good frame rate, is very difficult. The computer must process 8,294,400 pixels at about 60 frames per second if you want a realistic typical scenario where it's actually practical. Now, this is a very difficult task, as aforementioned. Usher in the video card. The video card is specifically dedicated to just displaying the image on the screen. The processor must process the physics and collection of files to load in order to be rendered. However, the video card is doing the actual rendering, or most of it. The processor gets the information on the hard drive or solid state drive for the game. This then gets looked at and sent to the RAM, the random access memory, which holds the temporary files while also being able to retrieve them at lightning fast speed, and then finally the information is sent to the video card to render them in an image of, say, whilst you're running in a field, with trees swaying in the wind, and other player models running around you and generating extensive lighting effects. You get the point. Scenes can be complex, and yet they must be rendered instantaneously. How does the video card do this? Well, it's like a processor at its basic level. However, it is different in the principle of how it is handled. Whilst it can still have multiple processors like a CPU, which typically has about 4 mini processors called cores, today video cards often have thousands. And this is not an exaggeration or rare case. This is all video cards. NVIDIA's new RTX 2070, the cheapest video card currently available from the new Turing architecture that they've produced, has 2,304 CUDA cores. These are what makes up the main chip, the GPU, the graphics processing unit. This is in addition to having its own dedicated RAM, which NVIDIA and many other companies have named GDDR, and then they usually attach a number at the end. So previously, the most common form of this was GDDR5. NVIDIA then introduced GDDR5X, and now Turing introduces GDDR6. This is again super fast storage for buffering frames on the screen, textures that are rendered and stored there in real time for quick access, and so many things are happening on the screen the processor inside cannot possibly keep rendering everything without little compensation. And this is also so textures stay loaded in versus having to constantly keep loading them off the hard drive or SSD, which would be impossible in a real world scenario because there would be too much loading off of the main storage and having the graphics processor have to render everything instantaneously. It just can't happen. The processor aforementioned, with the 2000 plus CUDA cores, is responsible for the actual rendering of the image. The GPU is designed to be able to read and interpret code, which then gives it the knowledge of proper algorithms and data sets it needs in order to produce three-dimensional shapes, surfaces, and textures, in addition to lighting and the appearance of certain objects. Once rendered, as aforementioned, these shapes and textures then get stored in the VRAM, the video RAM, for quick access to rapidly show frames on the screen, providing the illusion of motion. In order to be displayed, this information rendered by the GPU must then be passed through the PCIe slot, the Peripheral Component Interconnect Express, to the motherboard, which then sends the data through microcontrollers and processors on the motherboard to the main CPU in the system. It is worth noting that the CPU also plays a major role, as it has to send the information to the GPU in order for it to be rendered in the first place. The CPU also aids by helping process some of the physics in the game, like gravity, particles, moving projectiles, and say bullets from a gun, or a ragdoll, which is essentially what shows physics of objects interacting with the surfaces around them, so like sliding down a hill. These are all things that a CPU must process. This is still a very basic explanation of the science, and I look forward to diving into the topic once again in the future. This is, however, the first informal style video with format that I have really ever done, and in doing so, I hope to receive feedback of whether or not it was useful or helpful in the comments below. I plan on doing this style of video a lot more often and have a series of videos coming like this on my channel in the future. For now, please let me know whether it was good or bad in the comments below, and thank you for joining me in the journey to understand the basics of what a video card is.